Thank you for joining me on Ethocast. I am pleased to be joined by someone I had the opportunity to meet a few years back. He is a fraternity brother, and I promise y'all, I'm not going to have only alphas on these things. Although I'm not very shy about my fraternity at all. But Travis Martin, he's the associate dean of students and director of fraternity and sorority life at the University of Michigan. Travis, it's good to see you, brother. How are you?
Well, man, I am well. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's good to see you as well.
It's good
Absolutely.
to see you, man. And so one day I'm on LinkedIn, where I love to skulk about, and I see that Travis posts this research about leadership. Now, if you've noticed with me, part of the way I describe myself, part of my identity is that of a leadership enthusiast, and I really, really love to talk about leadership that much. So I see someone I know post something about leadership. Bam, I'm on it. I want to check it out. And what I did was I replied to Travis in the comments. I said, "Oh, I have to check this out. Part of my master's research revealed that the flaw in leadership development programs is it tends to focus too much on the individual achievement. Thank you for sharing." Now, Travis responds to me, my dissertation was on socially responsible leadership, which is a construct within a framework of leadership called social change model of leadership. It posits that leadership should have individual, group, and community components. To your point, it's a great and comprehensive conceptual approach to leadership development. Leadership is so much more than a title, position, or individual concept. Be still, my beating heart. The man got me where I live. So, Travis, let me tell you, um, I have been having lots of conversations with folks in my professional community, the higher ed marketing community, about leadership. And one of the things that I say to them all the time is leadership is not a title or a position, but I say leadership is a process because there's always so much to learn and there is no one leader who has it all figured out. Like there's always something to figure out about the people who surround you. And I want to get into that in just a second, but let me ask you, with the kind of work that you do, and I'm so glad to have a director of fraternity and sorority life on the podcast with the kind of work that you do, first of all, what got you interested in it and how did you get here? What led you to this?
Yeah. A really great question. Um, so of course, I joined my fraternity, our fraternity rather, when as a collegiate student, and one of the things that I recognized that so much of my memories around the impact that I was doing around at least in my collegiate experience as I reflect back, was through my fraternity, right? And so that's
Mhm.
what kind of led me eventually, I mean, long story of how I particularly start working in fraternity sort of life. But as I reflected back on my experiences as a student, the most probably one of the most impactful experiences was that in fraternal natures, right? So whether that was in athletics or whether it was in my fraternity, it actually was a leadership program that I participated in as a small group facilitators that really, I think, had the epiphany for me. So I was working in higher ed prior to working directly with fraternity sorority students. But it was actually my participation in this leadership experience, this actual national program called Leadership. Uh,
Mm,
and Leadership is this 5 day immersive leadership experience where we take students off for 5 days, and it really helps them think about the process of their leadership development, right? The
mhm.
process of leadership. And part of days, the 7 days experience again. And on day seven, you're asked to create a commitment or reflection around what you will do different based on your learnings for the week. At that point, I was in higher ed, I was working in housing, and I found myself, right, really being drawn to this kind of student development space more so than
Mhm,
just
mhm.
managing a building, right, and housing and res life, right. And so I really started to question kind of career wise, where do I see myself being more effective? And it was from that experience that led me, this is even prior to dissertation, right, to
Mhm.
really wanting to work with students in the fraternity sorority community. And so that's what kind of led me there. And again, that's been, oh my God, almost 15, 16 years ago now. And so I've been in fraternity sort of life, have worked my way from a coordinator to, now director, and at this point now, even associate dean student.
Yeah. So a couple of things I want to acknowledge. So prior to being in Michigan, you were at Northwestern and also University of Georgia.
That's
Right.
correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then also we gotta, people who know me know I'm an HBCU advocate. And so we do have to shout out your alma mater.
Yes. Yes. Yes, yes, Mississippi Valley State University, and actually, the story I was telling you about what was most impactful around my collegiate experience was the foundation of the experiences I received at Mississippi Valley State University in
Yeah.
Itabena, Mississippi, where I was again a member of the football team there, but also joined my fraternity as well, Alpha Phi Alpha.
By the way, congratulations on the brand unveil that Mississippi Valley
Yes,
just did. It is dope,
yes,
man.
yes. I posted it on my Facebook page. I actually am excited about it. Actually, the athletic director, who we're unfortunately are losing to Jackson State, our rivalry,
Oh no.
but he's done a great job. I actually was in school. We were in school around the same time, and so
Yeah.
I have supported his leadership as our athletic director, and so excited about I think the future of Valley. And I'm a staunch supporter. Anybody knows me knows, that really knows me knows that I am a believer in my alma mater. I'm also a very big supporter of HBCUs as well, although I have
Yeah.
not worked in this space in a number of years. I've contributed back. I'm an active member of my alumni association. I contribute back financially. I have a couple of endowments that I support at my alma mater. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you hit my heart there when you said HBCU. So, I wanted to share.
Absolutely, man. And listen, this past Mardi Gras, I got a chance to see Valley March, and
Yes,
they have a
yes,
new
we,
big sound.
we turned up.
I was impressed, man. I was like,
Yes.
I was like, wait, no, I've heard Valley before. This is
Yep.
different.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
way different. So congratulations.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, so let's start at, let's start at the beginning. The views expressed on Ethocast do not necessarily reflect the views of the hosts, guests, or any entities with which this podcast's participants are affiliated. Questions, comments, email eddie@eddiefrancis.com. When it comes to let's say you are talking to someone, a member of one of the fraternities or sororities, one of the chapter presidents comes to you and says, I'm really having trouble figuring out how to engage my chapter brothers or my chapter sisters. Where do you start with them when you want to give them the leadership talk?
Yeah. So, one of the things I often will do, and then I've done this in my own experiences, is to ask the questions about, um, particularly in that situation, would ask, well, do you know where, has there been an opportunity or time set aside for shared vision casting, right?
Mm,
So,
mm,
and so oftentimes what I have learned from college students, right, and this is no knock on them, right, and particularly for those who are in leadership positions, is that they're here to be students, and I acknowledge that.
yeah.
They're here to be students. They're here to graduate. But oftentimes they just sometimes don't have the time, or at least maybe even the guidance to help them think about vision casting.
Hmm.
And also, and particularly in ways you do that is through, tangible things such as have you had a planning retreat with your membership, right?
Hmm.
Oftentimes they have not. They're like, well, yeah, we've always done this program, and we're going to just keep doing this, recycling the program. And so I'm like, well, you really, what you really miss in that is the opportunity to really get feedback from your membership to
Yep.
get them excited around a vision, right? And so, yeah, you can say we've always done this party on the third Saturday of every September, but is that really where the membership wants to be focusing the energy, right? And so taking opportunities to take in input and feedback from your membership in a variety of ways. You can do that by retreat, you can do that by surveys, you can do that by a number of ways, but to get people excited around and corralled around a vision. And so that's usually the first question I ask a student if they come in my office. I ask that on, have you done any planning retreats or vision casting with your membership?
Hmm.
And if they had not, certainly thinking about ways that they could think about planning something, implementing something like that in their
Hmm.
year.
So definition, vision casting. I imagine, are we talking like fishing? You cast a line, and I mean, tell us
Yeah,
what
yeah,
vision
yeah.
casting is.
Yeah. So So, a leader, in my opinion, right, particularly in a chapter setting, fraternal setting, president, right, obviously, clearly should have ran for their presidency with some type of vision around where they see the organization being, after they have completed their term in leadership, right?
Hmm.
And so, um, what I think leaders should be doing is again casting that vision. Where do you see the organization? You know, a year, two, three, whatever your
Yep.
your terms are, um, being after you've completed your leadership, and then telling that story and getting folks reactions and engagement on how they can help you, um, help move that vision along, right? So when you
Yeah.
cast your vision out, right, you're saying, okay, this is where I want to see the organization. Get on board to figure out how you see yourself helping me there,
Yeah.
right? Um, and it has to be broad and aspirational enough for folks can see themselves in their unique ways and how they can help you move along that vision, right? And so it can't be so uh, narrow
Right.
to
Yep.
where people can't get under it, right, or they can't get behind it, right, and so making sure that it's broad and aspirational enough so folks can, in their own unique ways, can figure out ways to be excited about how they can contribute their own personal skills and experiences and strengths
Yeah.
to that vision. Yeah. So
I can only imagine for a college student, just that small piece is pretty enlightening for them because one of the things I always talk to students about is when I was a chapter president as an undergrad, and I, it was basically throw them in the deep end and
yep,
help make them figure out how to lead this chapter. And I only had
definitely.
a chapter of like 10 brothers or something, but
Yeah.
it felt like I had 50 because I was sitting there like, I don't know. They're not listening to me. I don't know what to do. I'm getting upset with people. And had someone told me something as simple as, well, Eddie, cast your vision. I think that would have been a game changer for me, and it seems to me that what happens a lot of times, to your point about students, they come to school to go to school and to get a degree and to move on and to build a life. When it comes to something like leadership, there are a lot of hard lessons that may not necessarily have to be so hard if they have a framework to work
Yeah,
from. And do you find that when you talk to your students about that, that light does come on and they're like, oh, wait, okay,
absolutely,
hold on.
absolutely, yeah. I always say, when most times we don't know what we don't know, right,
Right.
and so I often do find that students just need the framework, right? They need just the how can I really make sense of this experience that I'm going through? I'm serving as the president, right? Like you said, people are not following me, but how do I make sense around how I get them to, or a way to get them, or my membership to at least follow a vision, right? And so some of
Hmm.
that is, right, just putting frameworks in place, right, for them. And I have found that students are will take it and run with it, particularly those who are have the skill enough to really understand how to communicate, right? And so part of it is being able to communicate um, that vision, right? And
Yeah.
so that's going to be something that you might have to be more tangible in helping them kind of work through. But I have found that students are,
Yeah.
particularly students who are in fraternity and sororities, right? Obviously, they've exuded some type of leadership characteristics that gets them in a place where I think they're easy able to work with that framework. So
As somebody who has been a director of fraternity and sorority life, what is it about Greek life? What is it about Greek life that attracts some of the most colorful folks on campus? It attracts some of the folks who have probably some of the strongest leadership skills. What is it about Greek life?
yeah, I was just having this conversation earlier with someone who's interested in joining a fraternity, and I think, at least from my research, right, there's so much research out there about fraternity and sororities, right? Part of it, particularly in the higher ed setting or even out in the community setting, that, individuals who are attracted to, these types of organizations already come, I think, oriented in a way that tend to be more social, right? They tend to want to have interactions with other people in a way that is different than maybe others. And so they already come with this kind of orientation that I want to be a part of this camaraderie of
Mhm.
individuals trying to meet a collective goal, right? Whether that goal is service, it could be, as I always joke and say, it could be sometimes, right? That collective goal is debauchery, right? Unfortunately, but there is this unique desire to be a part of a collective group. And
Mhm.
so, going back to my dissertation, one of the reasons why I was so excited about, well, I kind of make the connection is, well, we often say in fraternity sororities, we develop leaders, right? And so, the part
Mhm.
of being in the fraternity sorority is that you kind of develop these leadership skills, and we say we do all these good things for the community. Well, how, you can have leadership that again leads you to, as I mentioned, debauchery or negative. But how do we then take what we say we're doing around the impact we have on our communities, and say, how do you express your leadership to be in a more socially responsible aspect, right, around how
Yeah.
you engage with the community, right? So I think, most oftentimes people are attracted, again, I think fraternities to make some type of collective impact, and so and so my research really was very fascinating. And I think the social change model just kind of helped me put some sophisticated frameworks around, essentially, at the late most basic terms, how do individuals who join fraternities and sororities impact something greater than themselves, right? And so,
Mhm.
not about their own aspirations, right? Not about I held this title, et cetera, but how are they then taking this leadership experience they're having and impacting um, themselves, but also their organization and also the broader community, right? Uh,
Hmm.
so yeah.
You're listening to Ethocast. I'm Eddie Francis, and we are joined by Travis Martin. He is the Associate Dean of Students and Director of Fraternity and Sorority Life at the University of Michigan. And I was going to ask you to dive a little bit into social change. So, the social change model, I don't want to make you relive your defense here, but what is the social change model? How does it work?
Yeah. So the social change model is was, I think, established in the early '90s. I can't
Hmm.
remember the year. That's kind of getting into like dissertation level defense, but I think I'm pretty sure early '90s was kind of this framework around social change. In leadership studies that really
Yeah.
posited that leadership should be about how do we create social change, right? That's the purpose of leadership. That's why you want to develop good leadership, because you want to create some type of social change, right? So, uh, and so the social change model has kind of several dimensions of how they look at social change through leadership.
Hmm.
And it was, I think it's 7 C's, they call it. And so it says the 7 C's are: you should have a development of the consciousness of yourself. You should have congruence in how you're developing leadership. You should have commitment in how you are demonstrating leadership, common purpose, controversy with civility, which is essentially
Hmm.
you have an ability to, of course, navigate multiple viewpoints and perspectives, collaboration, and then
Hmm.
most important, citizenship. So these seven
Hmm.
C's are constructs of the social change model that you measure, right? Um, and so that's actually what was part of my dissertation. So essentially, that was a model for a survey data that was out of the multi-institutional study of leadership that, and it still's running today, where they do nationwide surveys to collect and measure leadership development along those 7 C's.
Hmm.
And so what I did is I took different types of fraternities and sororities and how they responded to that survey, members of the fraternity sororities, and looked at differences across fraternity sorority types. So I looked at MPHC organizations, our ISC or NIC organizations, our Panhellenic multicultural groups. Some of the limitations of the actual survey data that I use, that it doesn't necessarily posit or disaggregate by councils like that. It will say, historically, you could disaggregate data to make sense of culturally based groups in a conglomerate, right? So we couldn't necessarily
Hmm.
look at MGC versus MPHC. We could say
Yeah.
culturally based organizations altogether, right? But then you could separate out, well, what does NIC organization or men's white organizations look like, and or social organization, which is how the MSL looks at it, or what are women's.
Yeah.
um, historically white organizations or social organizations look like.
That's
So
really
yeah, so
interesting.
that's
You,
yeah. Again, I'd go down a rabbit hole of my dissertation again, but yeah, certainly wanted to let you ask any follow up questions to that.
well, no, that's interesting because so around that same time, so there's this leadership scholar out of Australia named Gail Avery, and she
Uh,
developed these four paradigms of leadership
uh,
throughout the course of time. Around the '90s, and her stuff is really based more on professional organizations, so
okay.
companies. And
Okay.
she noticed that around the '90s, there was a shift to more of a visionary style of leadership. But then when you get to the turn of the century into the new millennium, she's noticing a type of leadership that to me is really, it really runs parallel with Greek life, where it's called organic leadership, where a lot of the influence comes from membership, a lot of the influence comes from the rank and file. It doesn't necessarily come from this one person at the top or this group of people at the top with an in group. And so it's really interesting that those two types of leadership models were running around the same time. And for me, a lot of this happens because at some point people realized that what you have, like in a fraternity or sorority, you have all these diverse voices and you can't ignore them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have to start listening to how they think leadership should go, because at
Yeah.
some point the construct of your organization or whatever is gonna collapse within itself with so much diversity and so many more people having a voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's really fascinating that the social change model was running around that same
Yeah.
time as
Yeah.
that organizational model.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought about it that way, and I know there's about six different assumptions around the social change model, and one of them particularly is about that all individuals, right, doesn't necessarily have to have a formal leadership position, have
Right.
the potential to be leaders, right, and should be engaged in the leadership process, right. So that's
Hmm.
I agree, right. I wasn't. I would imagine if I was in kind of my in the academy at that point, right? I'd imagine something was happening, right, in the narrative around leadership studies that was kind of
Hmm.
pushing us to look at leadership a little bit different, right? So,
But what I really like about what you're doing though, and you kind of alluded to this on LinkedIn, that the issue that I see a lot of times with leadership and leadership studies is it tends to get stuck in the academy and nobody pulls it out and
right,
really talks to people about it in plain English. And I
right,
love the
yeah,
fact that you're in a position where you can pull something out of the academy and talk about it in
yeah,
plain English to a group of students
yeah,
who,
yeah,
because they are so visible on campus,
yeah,
they need to hear about it.
yeah.
Like they really need to
Absolutely.
understand what they're doing.
Absolutely. 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 Yeah. And, those I would imagine as I'm trying to draw some parallel here, right? Some of the skills you hear, even in that you feel like you hear in, folk going out in the job market looking for jobs, like people, particularly in supervisory positions, right? Is that you have to have these skills and know how to delegate, right? Delegate is an assumption that in your head, you're assuming that folks have the leadership capacity to do the job they should be doing, right? And so,
It is an
I often,
assumption.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But but the thing about it is, if you put the right people in the right place, right,
Yeah.
you set them up to be successful. They, of course, can exude the leadership skills that they have to be successful, and so that's a skill that you have to learn, right? How do I take the strengths of the folks that are working with me and set everyone up to be successful, right? And so
Hmm.
uh, and so that's again, as I tie that back to again the assumptions around the social change model, that leadership model you were talking about, is assuming that people don't need position to be leaders, right?
No.
And so,
That being said, one of the things that I focus on is I focus on the leadership practice of followership, and I love to talk to students about Kelly's follower types, the five follower types, and when you think about students who are in these positions, you have the chapter president, you have the executive board, and then you have the members. um, when you think about that, and even with your committees, I mean, you're still talking about your members of that chapter. So when you think about that, how do you talk to students about realizing that they have this strength, and also at the same time talking to chapter leaders? How do you get them to really pay attention to what the strengths of their members are while letting the members know, hey, you have a strength, here's how you can use it. You you may want to be the treasurer, but you're really kind of more like a party promoter.
Right, right, right,
So
right,
so
right,
how do you
right.
get those two things going at the same time with
Yeah,
students?
exactly, exactly. You know,
And oh, and by the way, and there's no shame in being the party promoter. That is perfectly
absolutely,
okay.
there is a role in that. Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, at one point, I have held that role. I think, but probably to my detriment. Right, I wasn't the person to hold the role. I've held that role before,
Mhm.
but wasn't probably the right person to be holding that role. But yeah, and I think you make a really fascinating point and an interesting point. And so part of I think the purpose of vision casting, because my thing is that we don't expect the president to be able to know and put people in place. Like that's, it's not like the president or any leader in position, right, needs to be kind of pulling the strings of their members, right? And so I don't want to create that kind of visual. But I think the beauty around vision casting and getting folks corralled around a vision is that folks will naturally show that leadership to say, this is what I can bring. These are the strengths that I bring, right, to the table. Going back to that example where I talked about me being in a party promoter position when I wasn't the right person to be in the position, right, was because of a leader that I was allowing to pull a string, right? It was like, we need you to do
Mm,
this. And is that it wasn't me getting excited around a vision to say, okay, well, this is what I can bring to that vision of getting us to where we're going to be in 2 years.
yeah.
And so again, that's because I think if you don't get people excited about a vision and them excited about how they can contribute to the vision, then you end up with having to put the wrong people in. People are doing the wrong things that they shouldn't be doing. They're not really playing to their strengths, right, etc. And so you're essentially managing people, and we know management and leadership are two totally different things, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so we have to exude that leadership and get folks excited to bring that strength naturally to the table. And so and so that's why I tell folks, as president or as any leader of an organization, right, you have to set that vision. It's critically important that we do that first, is to set that vision and purpose, and then get
Mhm.
people to step up and show that leadership, right, by saying, this is where these are my strengths. This is how I can help us get to where we are. So
At the end of the day, when you are working with a community of fraternity and sorority members, especially knowing how diverse the community is from council to council, from organizational type to organizational type, at the end of the day, what is your vision? What would you like to see them do? And how would you like to see them interact with campus in a healthy way?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I clearly, I always tell students generally this is that I would admit that I come with a little bit of bias because I was in a fraternity, but I do think on a college campus, fraternities and sororities have the capacity to be the quintessential example of social change, leadership on a college campus. And so what I ultimately want, and we just did this as a unit here at Michigan, is I've been here 3 years, and we did some actual strategic planning,
Mm,
as an office. And part of that was to set our vision and mission, right? It certainly wasn't mine, but we talked about this, and what we came up with as a community, right, or as an office, is that we want our fraternity sorority community here at Michigan um, to be the shining example of health and leadership, right? Health and well-being. We want them to be some of the most healthy and positive well-being aspects of around what our campus community looks like, and we want them to be able to create a sense of belonging for
mm,
peers on campus. And so we know that particularly on a college campus, students are able to get to graduation if they are healthy, they have good well-being, and they have a sense of belonging. They feel like they belong here. And we
Mm.
think this is what fraternity sort of life brings to Michigan, right? This is our unique niche around why we should exist at Michigan, and we should create some sense of belonging for students and for them to create that in a healthy and respectful way, and for them to be able to make a positive impact on their communities. So
Outstanding, man. So, Dr. Travis Martin, he is the Associate Dean of Students and the Director of Fraternity and Sorority Life at the University of Michigan. Travis, thank you so much for joining me on Ethocast.
absolutely. Thanks for being here. Always good to be with you.